This episode of First and Five is proudly brought to you by Awaken 180. There's always a new weight loss supplement, diet, or medication promising to get you results. For proven results, choose a solution for weight loss. Fast, easy, and free support for life. Awaken180weightloss.com.
One of the things that excites me the most about what we do at Awaken 180 is to give back freedom to someone that may have lost their freedom due to weight. We want to be able to provide that to people.
Bills Mafia, what's going on? It's Dave Myers from Built in Buffalo. I am the host of First and Five, your daily podcast to get you up to date on all things Bills. Today, I have a guy that I've spoken with several times, and I enjoy his insight that he gives on the Bills injury front. Kyle Trimble from Banged Up Bills. How we doing, man? How's it going?
I'm doing real well. Enjoying the offseason, staying real busy, but looking forward to football, getting back in the swing of things.
Yeah, there's always stuff to talk about, especially now is good to have you on because I think with the Bills being back yesterday for the offseason program to get kicked off, and then we have OTAs and minicamp and stuff like that, I think it's always a good time to check back in with stuff that happened in last season and kind of see where these guys might be progressing heading into the upcoming season. So we got a few players that I want to touch on. Obviously, there's going to be a couple names here that I think everybody wants to know a little bit of information on or any kind of insight, Kyle, that you might have. And of course, the first one that I want to start with is Dalton Kincaid. I think everybody is familiar with his PCL injury. It's been 2 years now that he's been kind of managing this injury. And when Joe Brady met with the press at the owners' meetings, it was already brought up. And I think some Bills fans got a little scared when he was kind of talking about what sounded like load management. So, from your perspective, where do you think this PCL injury is at? Is this something, since he opted to not have surgery, is this something where we could see, like last year, he was kind of, you could tell going through the stages as the season progressed, where the Bills were putting him on almost like a pitch count or a snap count, things like that. So, what can you kind of tell us if there's any information that you have to kind of get us updated on Dalton Kincaid heading into the 2026 offseason program and then into training camp?
So Kincaid's knee injury has been a lot of twists and turns. Quick recap: he injured against Colts back in 2024, diving for an overthrown ball by Josh Allen. Misses, I think it was about 3 games, and came back and had to wear a knee brace the rest of the season. Rehabs in the offseason really works on strengthening, getting stronger. We saw him in the weight room, and we heard all about how he was working on getting his body more hardened, because that was one of the complaints about him, that his body just wasn't up to snuff yet. So comes into training camp, is doing fine, injures it with a collision between Matt Milano, I think it was Christian Benford, early in training camp, misses like 1 practice, and then he re-injures it again while he's rehabbing from a hamstring strain suffered against Miami in like week 10. So I missed a few games as a result of that, and we find that the knee is just kind of gutting it through. And I had heard that there was rumblings that he was going to need surgery, which wouldn't be surprising given that he'd already hurt the knee in 2024, injured it again in 2025, and then we hear during the Josh Allen press conference that he's not getting surgery. Or sorry, not the Josh Allen press conference, the Joe Brady press conference when he was announced as the head coach. So to hear that he wasn't getting surgery is really surprising considering how long this has lingered. Normally, the PCL is not repaired because it stops the knee from going backwards. It's not as important as its cousin or brother, whichever way you want to look at it, the ACL. And it does have a better blood supply. It can scar down and heal up. But when a ligament is significantly injured enough, I feel it does need to be repaired. He did go out to get second opinions from what Brandon Beane had told us, and they said they don't want to get the surgery. Once again, after he suffered this injury in 2024, I was okay with him not needing it because the research shows you don't need to do a surgery. But when he kept on re-injuring it and was really affecting his ability to be out there, that's when it said, hey, we need the surgery. I'd heard that through the grapevine that there was talks of surgery. And ultimately, I don't know if it was he decided not to, or if the surgeon said that he didn't need to. I would imagine the surgeons led him to that decision where he did not want to do the knee surgery. Their outcomes are pretty good. There is an issue with residual laxity if he did get the surgery, and they only indicate the surgery if there's multi-ligament tears in there or if there's significant laxity where their knee is unstable. So either the knee is stable enough to where they say, hey, you don't need the surgery, or they're saying, hey, this thing's okay, you can rehab it, And then if it gets worse, then we'll fix it. Kind of like what we saw Gabe Davis when he was with the Bills and then went over to Jacksonville. He tore his knee up pretty good before he came back to us. But going off all that there, my concern is, what are they going to do differently this year that they did last year? Because he would have been rehabbing, this injury is pre-existing. What are they going to do differently? I know the only thing that they're doing differently is he's not with the Bills facility. He's in for OTAs, but he was rehabbing elsewhere, I think in Southern California, which I know there's some really good therapists out there. So what's he doing differently out there that they didn't do up in Buffalo? I don't know. Maybe we'll find more about that once media availability is a thing with OTAs, but I think he should have gotten the surgery, but I also don't know the information, and I do respect what the surgeons are and trainers and PTs are saying, because they obviously know more about that because they're working in the NFL and I'm not.
Yeah, I think there's some part of the fan base that there's a little cause for concern, because this is now 2 years in a row where arguably your best pass catching offensive weapon can not be available when we need him to be available, because we've seen when he's out there, he's a huge asset for this offense. So I guess it's something we'll just have to keep monitoring, and obviously we'll check in with you for updates, because I know you'll have them as we progress through OTAs and mini camp and training camp and stuff like that.
And
all right,
I won't be surprised. I won't be surprised if we do see him be on that load management, like Joe Brady said, unfortunately. And it's just, I don't want him to be, but if that's how you're going to get him through the season, maybe the knee naturally heals up, great. But I'm real hesitant to give him a contract extension until he proves that knee is ready to go.
Yeah, the Bills did pick up his 5th-year option, which is only a little over $8 million. So, I mean, that was a no-brainer to have that guy. So let's talk about Ed Oliver, because Ed Oliver dealt with some injuries last year. He had the torn left bicep. He had meniscus damage that he suffered while he was rehabbing. Now we saw him come back and play. Is there a situation where you think Ed Oliver is not going to be ready to go for training camp and then the season? Or do you think that by now enough time has gone by to where Ed should be good recovering from both of those injuries? What's your thoughts there?
He should be fully good to go. There should be no hesitation, especially with the biceps. And then with the knee, he got pulled out during the Broncos game. Like, he played like the first half and then he got pulled out for some reason. I think they did say it was knee, but we didn't get reports that he had to get the knee cleaned out again or anything else. I mean, he's been on social media enough that I haven't seen where he's been laid up at all because of the knee. So there's no reason why he shouldn't be ready to go for training camp, and then he should be able to participate with OTAs, no problem. I'm sure they're watching the knee just to make sure there's not any problems with that. I mean, a little fraying is not a big deal with that. They can clean that out. Just when it gets to be a big tear where they have to repair it, that's when you see extended missed time. But the biceps are really, like, not saying they never happen again, but like, it's really low percentage, and it healed and he's able to come back and play. It was an incredibly fast, timeline to come back there. But with more rehab and just letting things continue to get stronger, there shouldn't be any future problems. It's not like he plays through that and then it's gonna take the same mechanism of injury to happen again. So it's not like he's gonna come back too soon and tear it out because he's at a higher risk, like we see with ACL tears or some other things like that there. So he's gonna be good to go. And it's just it's unfortunate what happened last year, but it's also a testament to the training staff and his work ethic that he's able to come back as quick as he did.
Yeah, I think a lot of what got swept under the rug was the training staff and the ability to get him back as soon as he was able to come back, because you had the biceps injury and then you had obviously the meniscus issues. So that's a testament to the Bills training staff. We've heard a lot about the Bills training staff over the past couple of years because of all the injuries and the long grocery list that seems like that we see every week during the season of the injuries. But they do a really good job, especially with things like with Dalton Kincaid with the load management, and especially with Ed Oliver with the injuries that he's coming back from. All right, so fan favorite Tyrell Shavers, obviously torn ACL, pretty gruesome looking injury. Now everyone's ACL is different. We all know that, and NFL players' timetables are always different. So what can you tell us about Tyrell Shavers? Can we expect to see him sometime this summer, or do you think that this is something that's going to bleed into the season? Like, what's your thoughts and information that you can share about Tyrell Shavers?
I mean, it's incredible to find out they tore his ACL in the playoff game and continue to play. I mean, He probably knew that.
That's crazy.
That itself is incredible. I mean, you do hear about that with, like, Tommy Doyle did that a few years ago with like a handful of plays left, and then you hear about guys sometimes kind of cutting it out with a little bit. Philip Rivers did that 20 years ago, which is crazy to think about. So it's unfortunate that happened. It sounded like it was a pretty clean ACL tear, or at least a partial ACL tear. This happened in the second quarter, and he missed part of the time and came back all bruised up. We found out later. So knowing the timeline with that, he had surgery pretty quickly after the injury happened, which is uncommon. I mean, we do see sometimes where the swelling isn't too bad, and then they want to get ahead of it be with the timelines there. But we're talking this happened in like late January, I think first week of February. I can't find the exact time frame where I had it written down at, but you're looking at least 9 months before he can even start doing football related things. Now during rehab, they're doing all this stuff like trying to get ramped back up, but they know if you return before 9 months, there's a higher risk to re-tear, and they're not going to do that. And I've not seen the Bills do that at all with anybody with an ACL since I've been covering the team, which they've always waited for that 9-month mark, and then they slowly ramp them back up there even more. So I think Von Miller might have been the fastest one we saw, but he was really pushing, for different reasons, him being older and, running out on time there. So looking at Tyrell, I mean, you're looking at maybe October where we start seeing maybe do something since he's probably starting pop, and then you might see him come back in maybe, November, December at the earliest. And keep in mind, he's not going to do the things he was doing before. And he wasn't a huge part of the offense, with the receiving game, but he was key on special teams. So we can see him kind of work his way back in, but he's going to be a break glass in case of emergency. You're going to ramp him up when you need him. He's not going to necessarily come back as fast as he can. They're going to, make sure he's fully ready. And then there's not going to be any risk to re-tear more so than there already is. So it's unfortunate, just the time of it. But I mean, if he plays as hard as if he rehabs as hard as he plays, like he did, playing through the ACL tear, I think he'll come back, and then we'll see an even better Tyrell Shavers in 2027.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I had meniscus surgery last year. Now I'm not in football shape, and I'm not younger, but I can't imagine playing, a combative sport with, that injury. And just a testament to how tough that guy really is. All right, so let's talk about Terrell Bernard. As everybody knows, he had right ankle surgery. He kind of announced that on social media. I feel like he was kind of playing through this most of the season, and you could tell it was affecting his play. The speed wasn't there that we saw in the 2024 season. So kind of walk me through what you know about Terrell Bernard and his right ankle surgery, and maybe where he's at in recovery process, and if you think he's going to be good to go for training camp.
His injury, like we talked about Dalton Kincaid, that was another one that's lingering for a long time there. He had originally hurt the ankle back in 2023 against the Los Angeles Chargers. He had tweaked his ankle, and then he played against them and played against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs, and that's where he actually dislocated his ankle. And he told us that. And then he didn't get surgery, and then continued to play through it. And then last year it was kind of okay. And then this year he did something, just set it off again. And we knew that he had issues with his hamstrings during the year. And then he had injured his ankle against, I think it was the Falcons. I mean, it's all up on my website if you want to go back and look for the exact details, but it's amazing how long he played through this thing. And at some point, the ankle just got too bad where they had to get it shut down. So Eric Turner of Cover One had posted that Terrell Bernard had posted those pictures up on Instagram. And based off of the scar presentation, and we know what the injury was because he basically told us what happened, what was going on. I thought he had suffered the tears to the anterior talofibular ligament, the calcaneal fibular ligament, and then the deltoid ligament on the inside. And once again, he had told us some of that stuff, that he had subluxed the ankle, he had some damage to it, and then based on the scar location tells us that he had surgery to that area there. So he, without getting into too much details, he basically had everything tightened back up and repaired so the ankle had stability. But I'm sure the ankle flopped around. It probably rolled on him like crazy. And every time he rolled on it, just created more damage and just made it more and more difficult to push off there. So we saw that in the film where he wasn't able to move around as well as he wanted to, lacked a lot of explosion. And I don't care how much bracing, tape, everything else on there, when that ankle is not stable, or any joint for that matter, you just cannot get the explosion off that area. So we don't know that he was at OTAs. We didn't see any pictures of him, but it's only been one day. But he might still be rehabbing and working his way back there. So once he gets back out there, the outcome measures are pretty good. The procedure returned 54% of athletes, with 88% satisfied with their outcomes. And then failure rates were up between 5 and 28%. But most people were able to come back and do pretty well. Knowing that he's an NFL athlete, he has best surgeons and rehab available to him. He's going to come back and do pretty well. We've seen other guys, like I think it was Taiwan Jones years ago, had gotten that done. Sometimes the ankles just get so beat up that they need to be fixed. And I'm sure they're trying to kick the can down the road as long as they can. And if I get to the point where it is affecting his play, but we should see him come back and hopefully become less injured this year. Though he's had other injuries such as the hamstrings that I mentioned, the dislocated elbow, among other things throughout his career.
So you think he's good? He's going to be good to go for training camp and the season, and everything's good to go. You think recovery
Yeah,
wise?
considering the scars he posted, like what the scar healing looked like at that time, and then knowing they probably want to get that done as soon as they could, knowing the timeline. I can't find off the top of my head here where it is, but I want to say it was like 6 to 8 months for that. But it's let's see, full no. Yeah, it's somewhere in my article. I read too much there. 4 to 6 months, so it's like 6 to 8. But he should be good to go for training camp without really any hesitation when he does get back out there in late July.
That's good because obviously with him signing that big contract extension, the Bills are going to need to have him be as close to, if not as 100%, for as much of this season as possible, especially with the new defense that the Bills are going to be putting out there. So, all right, let's talk about Spencer Brown. And I think when I mentioned Spencer Brown to you, when I sent over the show notes, you asked me, do we want to talk about the shoulder? And I said, well, let's talk about the back and the shoulder. So I think there's a little bit of concern out there in the Bills fandom that Spencer Brown could be dealing with this back situation for the better part of his career. Now, you can tell me if that's correct, incorrect, or if that's something that we just need to monitor. But then obviously let's talk about his shoulder as well and see where that could be heading into recovery 100%, what that looks like as far as rehab and things like that. So what's your thoughts? First, we could talk about the back, because we know he's had back issues earlier on after he was drafted. That's when the back stuff was happening. He kind of, I think he's played pretty healthy and played at a high level. And then obviously the shoulder injury this past season. So what's your thoughts overall on Spencer Brown with the back and the shoulder? Like, where do you think he's at right now in his recovery process?
The back, we know that he had a flare up at the beginning of training camp that kept him out for a little bit. And he'd even said to the media, he goes, "Hey, this stuff has happened more than you guys report on and whatnot there." So it is one of those things, like, we know it. We know he had the microdiscectomy. We know he's incredibly tall and he is big. I mean, he's well proportioned. So it's not like he carries all his weight in his belly, where that's going to really put a lot of stress on the low back, among other things there. But the issue is just he's a big, tall guy. It's been down a lot. You're going to see a lot of guys with back issues, and it's not even like there's a big issue. It's like, oh, don't draft a lineman. I mean, they know it's a known issue that they have every, I think, offensive and defensive lineman. I know offensive lineman for sure, at least they undergo a X-ray at the combine, a lumbar X-ray, to at least look at the back, quality of the back, and that's how they found Deion Walker's back injury last year. So we know it's a thing. We know that when you start getting microdiscectomies, that you sometimes reduce the vertebral body height. That can also put stress on the other vertebral bodies and on the disc. So, like, it wouldn't be surprised me if he has some degenerative changes in there, but he's also playing football. He's getting paid a lot of money. I think he's going to sign up for that. I think anybody would. So yes, he's going to pop up on the injury report again. He's going to maybe have some flare-ups where it just locks up on him. There's going to be some things in that, but his injury concerns, his play on the field outweigh those injury concerns. Let's put it that way. And that's what I was going to say about Terrell Bernard earlier. When he signed that contract, his play on the field outweighed those injury concerns, and then it kind of balanced out last year. Right now, Spencer Brown shows he can still play. He can still play pretty well, and it's just something you have to monitor. And it's something that he's aware of. Could a fusion be down the line? Could they do a artificial disc replacement? I'm not aware of that they're doing as many for lumbar as they are for cervical. Considering how big he is, I don't know if you'd want to do that, but like there's probably gonna be future problems down the line, but that's future Spencer Brown's problem, I guess. So, I don't want everybody freaking out that there's gonna be a back problem. Like, it's, he didn't really have anything coming in for into the pros with this, or even high school. He was pretty good from what I recall before he signed the contract, from what I have here. It just, sometimes you need to, it just kind of comes with the territory with him. So I don't want to dismiss it saying it's nothing, but I also don't want to lean into it and say, oh, it's a big problem. Like, okay, well, when it gets to be too much of a problem, he'll retire. But I mean, he's still pretty young. He has a good handle on it. They know how to manage this thing, and I don't think there's gonna be an issue moving forward, other than the occasional flare-ups, which we find out guys have problems all the time that we don't hear about. And as for his shoulder, I thought he had torn his labrum. I think it was his right shoulder that he injured against the Texans, and he was trying to block and he just couldn't get the job done. He had to miss a few games after that. He didn't get any surgery from what I've seen because he's been on a million podcasts. He's been out golfing. He's been doing everything. And sometimes with those labrum tears, if it was that, sometimes they're small enough where they just let things scar down, rehab it, and you're good to go. Labral tears in offensive and defensive linemen are pretty common. Just when it gets to the point where it's so unstable in there, where you get to get surgery. So he's done well with the previous one he had. I think 2 or 3 years ago. It's just a matter of just dealing with it and kind of getting back up there to brace it. But it's not a do or die thing. But he was an oft injured guy. That's the reason why he fell to the third round. On top of him playing at a smaller school coming out of college, but he's shown he's worth the money, and I'm willing to bet that he's going to continue playing at a high level for at least a few more years before he start worrying about that contract being a huge anchor on what the offensive line and the Bills do as a whole there.
Yeah, I think Spencer Brown is a guy that, he's protecting that right side of the Bills line. And that's a guy that we often want to talk about because we've seen him play at a high level. And then you can tell, like you mentioned, that Texans game where you could tell something wasn't right. You could tell that it just felt like he just couldn't get off right. And there was things like that just seemed like it was bothering him, but we definitely need him to be healthy. All right. So let's talk about Tyler Bass, a guy that we didn't see at all in 2025 because of the pelvic injury, and he had pelvic surgery. I think a lot of Bills fans were surprised this past offseason that the Bills restructured his contract to kind of make the numbers a little bit more, like not as big as they were for a kicker, especially a guy coming off where he missed an entire year with an injury. So what can you tell us about the pelvic injuries, specifically since he is a kicker? Obviously, we need his leg and his lower body to be healthy. So what can you tell us about Tyler Bass and what we can expect? I've seen reports saying that should be good to go. Again, I want to ask your expertise because he did miss the whole year. They put him on IR. Obviously, we brought in Matt Prater, and we know that whole story. So what's your thoughts on Tyler Bass and his future with the Bills going forward here, training camp and into the season?
Well, we know they brought other kickers in, so there's gonna be a competition, and the way they restructure the contract, he's gonna be able to be cut if he just simply isn't the best leg. So I think it's good. I think everybody needs competition with anything you do in life. So we'll see what happens, come going to training camp and whatnot. But going back to what Bass was, he got through about the first week of training camp and then started to have some what they call pelvic soreness, and that's all they kept it as until they got to week one, and then they did specify which side. Now with punters, kickers, and quarterbacks, you have to specify which side is the injured side, just because that affects betting lines, integrity, transparency, all that stuff like that there. So I think it was like left hip and then groin or whatever. So he tried going, had some type of setback before that first game, and then that's where they brought Matt Prater in on that red eye, and then he was shut down, and then there was talks about he might be able to come back, and it just never happened there. So I never got a clear picture on what this was. I thought it was osteitis pubis. It was basically where the pubis symphysis, it becomes irritated. It's like this disc in between the pelvic bones that help connect everything. It looks like a little disc if you look at a anatomy book, and it's just a piece of cartilage there. So that could be irritated, and they can do injections, they can do surgery. The gold standard is rehab to try to get this thing calmed down. So my bet was they shut him down for a few weeks to try to get him right. He played in that Tampa Bay game, was okay, and then something else set this thing off. And then they probably were trying more rehab. They can do injections. I did see a talk that in February, and there was a guy who was talking about core muscle injuries, and he goes, most guys will let you do one injection, try to get you better. Most guys won't let you do two, though. I think that's how he phrased it there, because if you think about the the pubic area of any male or female and try to put a big needle into that area. Nobody's letting you do that multiple times unless you're crazy
Right.
there. So that's basically what he was getting out there. So I wonder if they were trying injections, it wasn't getting better. And then they had said that, they had to undergo surgery at the end of November, and it never was clear what it was until Brandon Beane said he has sports hernia. So you can play through sports hernias, core muscle injuries, and you can still do fairly well. Like guys can play on them for a while, and then they find out, hey, I gotta get this thing fixed here because they just lose a lot of power. So I wonder if they were just trying to see, hey, can we get you back out there? Can we get you playing? Can we get you doing something? And then it just never really took. And then the core muscle injury, Brandon Beane says about sports hernia, would suggest that because they did say that he would have been able to potentially be able to play in the Super Bowl had the Bills made it that far. So if this was indeed a core muscle injury, I wonder why they didn't get fixed sooner, because the timelines for return are pretty quick with those. It just comes down to reattaching everything and then let everything scar down. But sometimes you try to get guys back sooner and then it's kicking the can down road, longer than it should be. But what I'm getting at is they have excellent return to play, and then there's really not too many issues. And I'm sure if there's any lingering issues in there that they went and fixed everything up. Could it happen again? Sure. He's kicking position that can happen in a lot of different positions, like we see with defensive linemen or guys that are really using one side to, get out, explode off the side of the line, such as defensive end or, in kicking or punting. So saying all that, he should be good to go. This could have been something that's lingering for a lot longer, and then it finally just reared its ugly head in 2025. But he has a big target on his back. I hope that somebody pushes him and makes him be the best kicker he can, because we are still paying him a lot of money, even though that they did restructure his contract.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when when training camp comes around. Like you said, they brought in some competition for him, and like competition makes the cream rise to the top. So, all right, another fan favorite, a guy who we were all excited about when the Bills signed him, and then we saw him play. We waited 6 weeks for him to play, and then we saw him play a game and a half, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's the greatest thing since sliced bread." Michael Hoyt, ACL, or torn Achilles, and I feel like, as you alluded to earlier with Tyrell Shavers, this guy's a freak athlete, right? I feel like we always want to think the best as far as, well, he's going to push the envelope on return. And this happened possibly early enough into the season where he could be ready to go by the time training camp or the season rolls around. So what is a realistic return based on the information that you have for Michael Hoyt? Because I do think with this new defense that Jim Leonard's going to install, I think he's going to be a huge part of what they want to do. Obviously, he's been signed for multiple years. The Bills and Brandon Beane want him to be a part of the future of that defense. So what's your thoughts on Michael Hoyt, and what can we expect going forward as far as what we see recovery-wise from him?
He should be good to go week one, barring setbacks. I know he was on the Eric Wood podcast, was talking about be ready, full clear, and go by July 1st. And that's still, I won't say on the aggressive side of things. It's not like he was saying he's going to come back in 5 months like we saw with that Rams running back a few years ago, who came back to play in the Super Bowl. But it's not like that. But the average time is about 11 months to come back, which will put him about October, because he did tear in early November. And then, but you figure they was working hard. They had enough time to get this thing going. It's realistic. He could be ready to go, for training camp. If he does start on pop, it's gonna be like for a week or two. I can't imagine he's gonna be on there for a long time. But keep in mind, even if he does return and he's free and clear for day one or training camp, he's not gonna be the same player. I mean, the Achilles is a big rubber band, and it's really, really stiff right now. I mean, it's stiff that we don't want to overstretch it, and then you cause laxity in the area and then lose power that way. But you also, when it's that stiff, you're not going to get as much power pushing off of it either. So it's going to take some time to build back up there. There is a decline in games played, shorter career length a little bit. I mean, he's on 3-year deal with us there. And then, there's a 22% net decrease in power among all positions. Some of the research is like there's a lot out there, but sometimes specifically for defensive linemen, it doesn't go down that specific for that there. So basically what I'm getting at is he's not going to be the pre-injury Michael Hoyt for 2026. Now, 2027, when he's under contract, that's a different story. And then maybe you start talking about a contract extension if he does bounce back there. So if he does start rounding back into form, it's going to be the second half of the season, which is where we're going to need him at, considering injuries, and then just need that push for the playoffs there. But I temper your expectations on Hoyt. It's not saying that he's not working hard, just these things take time to get back. Some guys come back a little bit quicker and play like they never left, and other guys just take a little bit of time to get back up there. So he should be good to go, barring setbacks. It just comes down to just rounding back into form, and that's a time thing. You can't speed it back up and just get pre-injury level. We saw that with Von Miller, with his ACL, and it just was unfortunate. And we see what he does when he gets to Washington. Well, we're not going to worry about that with Hoyt unless they decide to cut him. But I think you just have to have patience with them and say, hey, let's stick with it. He can contribute, and then can be better in the second half of the season for hopefully a deep playoff push.
Yeah, definitely. What I want to emphasize what you said about we need to temper expectations, because we've seen this story before with a lot of players in the NFL where we're hyping them coming back, and then we're like, this guy is not playing like he usually does. And then you see as time progresses, because we don't like to be patient as football fans, but as time progresses, we see those guys kind of retake that form of what they were before the injury. But like you said, this takes time. And a lot of the stuff that I've seen out there in research as far as the ACL injuries, it's usually the second year is where you were like, okay, there he is. Like now he's back to who he was before. So
same with the Achilles and some other stuff.
Yeah.
It just those lower body things, they take time. Patellar tendon, quad tendon. I mean, just some of the things you cannot speed up, and there's a difference between returning back to a normal activity, where you can warrior things and then play NFL, and it just takes longer. But that's why sometimes you see high school kids come back and play just as well, because they were already a step ahead of the competition. So, now at the NFL, everybody's, there's still differences, but everybody's at a closer level than, head and shoulders above everybody else.
Yeah. So, all right, last but certainly not least, the conversation all offseason was about Josh Allen and his foot and what actually happened, what was really going on, how long was he playing through it. So talk to me about Josh Allen's foot injury and exactly what the injury was. Everybody said that he's going to be ready to go. Obviously, we saw him in the building yesterday. But I want to attack this conversation a little bit differently. What does this do to Josh Allen? Because we've seen him be a warrior. We've seen all the injuries that he's fought through, the broken hand, the UCL. We've seen all the stuff that he's fought through. But we're talking about a guy who relies a lot on his legs to extend plays, rushing aspect of it. A foot injury, first kind of let me know what the foot injury is, and then kind of let me know what long-term ramifications possibly this could have for a guy that bases a lot of what he does on his mobility. Like what's your thoughts on Josh's recovery and all that other stuff that goes along with it?
So, like you said, we saw him in the building yesterday. He's out participating, and they're not doing too much during phase 1 OTAs, but he's back out there, which is a good sign. And just a quick recap of the injury: he had had a avulsion of the fifth metatarsal, so it's basically a avulsion fracture, I should say. So this is basically where a small chip of the bone chips off somewhere in there, usually at the very, very end. Sometimes the tendon pulls that chunk of bone off there, and it just can wiggle around in there, or you just don't have a strong connection of the tendon. So keep in mind the tendon isn't necessarily damaged; it just pulled a chunk of the bone off. And he had injured this, originally injured this against the Browns when he's doing that stupid dance. I don't know what he's doing toward the end zone, where he's trying to skip Myles Garrett, and he gave up, I think, like 20 something yards, and that's where he kind of rolled over his own foot. And they're giving us some clues in the media with Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, and whatnot, saying this is an old bone injury, which gave us our first clue about this, because he injured it, I think, like 2 weeks later against Philadelphia. He rolled the ankle pretty good and had need a little attention to that. And then with the old bone injury, I thought he had actually originally suffered it back against Houston Texans the previous year, and they called that an ankle at the time, because I went through and knowing all the stuff that I do, he's only had so many ankle injuries. One was a high ankle sprain they somehow played through a few years ago, and this other one was where he tweaked the ankle, and he was kind of okay with that. So how you suffer this type of injury is you kind of roll the ankle, just like a great garden variety low ankle sprain like you see in basketball and whatnot. So this was enough to chip the bone. It was probably rattling around in there and causing a lot of inflammation, pain. He probably had shots, taping the heck out of it, just try to get stability. And then he's going to play through it because he's Josh Allen. I mean, if anything, this injury shows he's a little bit mortal, but I mean, he's still going to play through everything. There's going to be zero concerns with him moving forward. I did hear something about there might have been some small ligament damage in there. I mean, if he'd roll his ankle there, that wouldn't be surprising, but you'll get off the foot for a little bit, you rehab it. I don't see there's any problems with it. And then, there's just zero concerns moving forward. I mean, as going into how he's going to play, I hope that he's going to start taking not more care of the ball. I mean, he's pretty good about taking care of the ball, but like you might see him making, smarter decisions, maybe not rushing as much, but you also can't just shut that off either. It's Josh Allen. He's going to run, but maybe he saves that for more key moments and then stays more in the pocket. But we also know that guys get more serious injuries in the pocket than if they rush. And there's some good data about that out there. So you're not going to shut that off altogether, but you might see him be more selective on some of his runs or maybe more design runs more than those scrambles like we saw how he got hurt there. So, I just hope he keeps playing and we get a Super Bowl before he has something that knocks him out there. I mean, I know he just said he plays like he's immortal, but we know he is a human. And just hopefully that we get some wins out of him or a few championships before something happens where he says I got hanging up because the injuries are too much there. So knock on wood, we're not gonna have any problems with that. But going 2026, I think he'll be good to go until I guess the next injury, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, longest active starting streak among all quarterbacks. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, if I'm being honest with you, because I hate to talk about this out loud because I don't know if that's a streak that can come to an end because all streaks end, right?
Yeah.
Because of the play style of Josh Allen, that's the only thing that concerns me.
Yeah.
But I also know that he's made completely different. Whatever he's made out of is not like a normal person, like you and me. Like he's built different, and I'm just very fortunate that he's on our team. So
Yeah.
Kyle, where can we find all your work, your articles, and where can they follow you on social media and stuff like that before we get out of here?
You can find me everywhere, basically. I'm on X, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit at Banged Up Bills, so it's easy enough to find there. You can find all my work at bangedupbills.com. I do some work in the off season for Cover One during draft content. I've been a little delayed on that, working on something else I've been doing, so I haven't had anything out there. But you can also find a lot of work I do at DL Fantasy, looking at fantasy football content. You find me each and every week during the season on Locked On Bills, and then I think that's everywhere. But I mean, I've really dipped my toe into pretty much everywhere I can. If you can't find me, then I don't know what's wrong with you because I feel like I'm everywhere. But if you just type in the player, Banged Up Bills, you're gonna be able to find the article pretty quickly. You can go through my site and find everything. This is something I really enjoy doing. I find there's a lot of nuance to the injuries. It's not just ACL, he's gonna be back in 9 months, boom. It's hey, where guys are playing through. It's amazing the breadcrumbs that we see in hindsight with these different injuries, and I try to just pick up the breadcrumbs and put everything together to at least provide the most clear picture on how the team operates, how players are playing through things, and what they're dealing with, so it gives the proper context as to why your favorite player maybe is playing great or why they're not playing great, and then just how everything is moving forward so we can know what to expect each and every week.
Yeah, and I was talking to Kyle before we came on. I'm going to try to, as busy as this guy is, I'm going to try to get him on here regularly during the season with on First and Five and Built in Buffalo, because there's a lot of news that comes out on social media. But if you want the information that you really want to digest, that's where Kyle and Banged Up Bills is going to come in key, especially when we're all concerned about the Bills injury list and players and reports and stuff like that. So follow Kyle wherever you can. Read his articles. It's always great information. So for Kyle, Banged Up Bills, I'm Dave Myers. This has been First and Five, and we will see you guys on the next one. Go Bills.